It was a quiet evening in Cedar Creek, one of those rare nights where the world felt peaceful, untouched by the chaos that often crept into our lives. As I walked home, the crunch of leaves beneath my boots was the only sound that broke the silence. But there was something else, something that made my skin crawl, like I wasn't truly alone. I tried to brush it off, but the feeling wouldn't leave. It was like someone was watching me, following me, though when I turned around, no one was there. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as I quickened my pace. I remember this night well, because it marked the beginning of something I can never forget. The strange sensation that I was being watched only intensified over the coming days. And it wasn't long before I began hearing rumors of a figure lurking in the shadows. They called him the Stalker, a name that chilled my bones every time it was mentioned. He wasn't like any ordinary person. No, this was something far darker, something that came out only at night, slipping between the cracks of Cedar Creek's quiet streets. I first heard about him from my friend, Maggie, during a casual conversation at the local diner. "He's not just a man," she whispered, leaning across the table. "He's something more. I've heard people say he's cursed, that he doesn't age, that he's been around longer than the town itself." Her voice trembled as she spoke. She said he stalked the town, appearing just before midnight, and once he set his sights on you, you were never the same. Maggie's eyes darted nervously around the room, as though expecting him to materialize at any moment. The first time I saw the Stalker, I thought it was just my imagination. It was late, and I was walking down the street near the old cemetery, a place I used to avoid, but tonight I had no choice. The streetlights flickered as I passed, casting eerie shadows along the cracked sidewalks. That's when I saw him, a tall figure standing motionless at the end of the street, staring in my direction. I froze. His face was obscured by a dark hood, but I could feel his eyes on me. It wasn't just a glance, it was a stare that seemed to cut through me, stripping me bare. I tried to move, to call out, but my body wouldn't cooperate. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. My heart hammered in my chest as I forced my legs to take a step backward, then another, until I was running. My mind was racing. Who was he? What did he want? But deep down, I already knew. The Stalker didn't want anything from me. He wanted to watch, and that was far worse. The next few nights were the same. I would see him, always from a distance, always standing in the shadows. I couldn't escape him no matter where I went. It wasn't just me, either. People in Cedar Creek were starting to whisper about him, about how he seemed to follow certain people, particularly those with dark secrets or guilt weighing heavily on them. The more I heard, the more I began to understand. The Stalker wasn't just a figure in the shadows. He was the embodiment of fear, of judgment. One night I decided to confront him. I had to know what he wanted, why he kept haunting me. So armed with nothing but my fear and curiosity, I ventured out to the cemetery once more. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an unsettling glow on the old gravestones. My breath caught in my throat as I approached the spot where I'd first seen him, and there he was, standing in the same place, like he had been waiting for me. This time, I didn't back away. I walked toward him, my heart racing. When I was close enough, I stopped, just a few feet away. He didn't move, didn't acknowledge my presence. I could feel the cold emanating from him, as if the very air around him had chilled. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice shaking but steady. "Why are you following me?" To my surprise, he didn't answer. He didn't speak at all. Instead, his hand slowly reached up to the hood of his cloak, pulling it back just enough for me to see his face. My blood ran cold. It wasn't the face of a man. It was the face of a corpse, skin pale and decayed, eyes hollow and black. The stench of death filled the air as he stepped closer, his gaze never leaving mine. I didn't stay to see what happened next. I ran faster than I had ever run in my life, not daring to look back. My mind was screaming, but all I could hear was the thudding of my own heart. The stalker hadn't spoken a word, but his presence had left a mark on me, a mark that I couldn't erase. I didn't know what he was, but I knew I had to stop him before he claimed anyone else. The following days felt like a blur. I couldn't sleep, couldn't focus. Every shadow seemed to hide him. Every creak of the floorboards sent my heart into a frenzy. It felt like I was being hunted, but I didn't know by whom or what. The strange sensation of being watched never left me, and soon I began seeing the stalker more and more. Not just at night, but during the day too, in fleeting glimpses. Just when I thought I was imagining things, I would turn around to find him standing there, far off in the distance, watching, always watching. I tried to tell someone, anyone, what was happening, but the town was in denial. The locals had heard the rumors, but no one dared speak of them aloud. Old legends, they called it. Nothing but stories to scare the children, they said. But I knew better. The more I tried to convince people, the more they turned away, dismissing me as if I were crazy. But there was no mistaking what I had seen. The stalker was real. And he wasn't just haunting me. He was stalking the entire town. As the days passed, something strange began to happen. People in Cedar Creek started disappearing. First, it was just a few, then more, until the whole town seemed to be caught in his grip. I couldn't shake the feeling that the stalker was taking something from each person he followed. Their peace of mind, their sanity, perhaps even their souls. I couldn't sit idly by any longer. I had to figure out who, or what, he really was. I went back to the old cemetery, hoping to find some clue, something that could explain what was happening. It was midnight when I arrived, and the air was thick with the stench of decay, the full moon casting long, twisted shadows. As I walked deeper into the graveyard, I felt a presence behind me. It was the same feeling I'd had so many times before, the feeling of being watched, of being hunted. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me, slowly at first, then quicker, closer. My heart pounded in my chest as I spun around, but there was no one there, no figure lurking in the shadows. I exhaled in relief, but as I turned back around, I saw it. A tombstone that hadn't been there before, fresh, almost new, with the name Cedar Creek carved into it. I knelt before it, my hands shaking as I traced the letters. It didn't make sense. The cemetery was supposed to be old, ancient even. This tombstone didn't belong. My mind raced, the pieces slowly coming together. The stalker wasn't just some ghost, he was tied to this place, to the very history of Cedar Creek. And whatever he wasn't going to stop until he had claimed everything. Just then, I heard the rustle of leaves behind me. I didn't turn around, but I knew he was there. I could feel him, the stalker coming closer. There was no escape. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I wasn't just a victim in this twisted tale. I was part of it. My presence here, my search for answers, had only drawn him closer. I had unknowingly played into his hands. I had to make a choice. Stand and fight, or run and hide. But how could I fight something that wasn't even human? What could I do against a force that had been haunting this town for generations? The footsteps stopped just behind me. I could feel his presence now, his cold, suffocating energy pressing down on me like a weight. And then, in a voice that was not a voice at all, something more like a whisper in the back of my mind. He spoke. "You shouldn't have come here," the whisper said, curling around my thoughts, suffocating me. "Now, you belong to me." The world seemed to spin around me. The cemetery faded away, replaced by darkness, complete, unyielding darkness. I could feel my breath growing shallow, the air turning thick with fear. The stalker was pulling me into his world, a world where nothing made sense, where time didn't exist, and the only thing that mattered was his presence. And then, as quickly as it had begun, it stopped. I was standing in the cemetery again, as if nothing had happened. The tombstone was gone. The stalker was gone. The night was silent once more. But I knew it wasn't over. It wasn't really over. The stalker was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the next soul to fall into his grip. If you've ever felt like you were being watched, like someone or something was following you, then you know the kind of terror I felt that night. And I can tell you this: the stalker isn't just a story, he's real. And no matter how far you run, no matter how much you try to escape him, he will always be there, watching, waiting. If you want to hear more of the dark and mysterious tales that haunt our world, make sure you subscribe. And remember, sometimes the things that are watching us are waiting for us to look away. Don't make that mistake. Stay tuned for more chilling stories on Eerie Tales.